And welcome back to Creative Thinkers. As always, my name is Miguel Valenzuela, and we are always bringing you a special guest. Today we have Michelle Graell. She is a ballroom dancer, dance instructor, and choreographer. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Miguel. Excited to be here.
Oh, we're super excited to talk to you. So there's so many things to talk about. As always, I talk to my guests before we come here so I can get a little bit of insight. You're actually an El Pasoan, right?
Correct.
So one of the first questions that we talk about here is creativity. How in the world do you feel that El Paso is a creative city? Because a lot of people may not think that it is the most creative city in the world, but how do you pull the creativity out of this city?
Absolutely. I feel like there's so much creativity in El Paso kind of everywhere you look. The story of Menudo, I know that we were talking about this earlier, you know, the fact that there was a mom that couldn't provide for her family, and so she had the last part of the cow left, and she made something of it, and that's how we have this amazing dish that we call Menudo now. But what I feel is that while I was, you know, growing up in El Paso, we make do, and not just make do, we make things more beautiful with the resources that we have.
I think that's important because we're lacking in resources in many ways, right?
100%.
And we do the best that we can. How do you think that that is a creative thing? Because it's something that a lot of people don't address here in this city. The fact that because we lack in some ways and we try to do the best that we can, how does that equate to creativity?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we find different ways of making things work, not just in the small realms, but for the city itself. And I see it because in certain ways, I mean, I've seen some really interesting things that I've seen in El Paso way before. I see them in the big cities like Los Angeles. And it was really interesting to me because I'm like, we used to do that in El Paso all the time, you know? So, being in LA and it's the new trend, I'm like, I think people
Been
are
there,
just,
done that,
yeah,
right?
Honestly.
And then coming from El Paso, this is another thing. I think that going to other places is important. It's something that I've tried to do a lot in my life is travel. And you had said that you had lived in a couple of other cities. What cities did you live in, and how did they help you out?
Yes, first of all, I was so scared to move. So for anyone that is creative or not creative, I say El Paso, and I always thought I would not come back to El Paso, to be super honest, but there's something special about here that will bring you back home.
Right.
Going to other cities just let me be exposed to other ways of viewing life, a whole different energy and a different feel, because Las Vegas was very different from Los Angeles, and even living in the little compartments of LA. I lived in Beverly Hills, I lived in Santa Monica, I lived in Sherman Oaks, and each experience was 100% different. So it's interesting to me that just living in different areas and exposes you to different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of being that you wouldn't expect. And definitely it makes you understand yourself more. It makes you understand the world a lot more, definitely.
That's an absolute truth. In Vegas, you did something that was very interesting. You started off kind of working a normal job, and then you kind of got pushed into something. What was that something you got pushed into?
Yeah, so I left to be a marketing director for a real estate firm, and I was actually working probably 40 hours a week, and there was a need for a hip hop class, a teacher for the kids class at this studio. And I went in, and it's funny because I even negotiated badly because he asked me how much I wanted to get paid, and I was in the middle of work, so I wrote, I want this much. Not thinking he would ever pay me, and thought I would have to negotiate down, but I threw my phone back in my desk and looked 5 hours later, and he had a whole conversation with me. I can't do that, I can. Okay, you're hired, come teach the hip hop class.
So I hope that it was a negotiation up.
It was definitely, like, lesson learned, always be silent.
So he thought you were ignoring him at that point.
Exactly, and I was just genuinely at
job.
work. Yes.
I love it. But I think you wouldn't have had that experience if you hadn't taken the opportunity to go somewhere else.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. I will say, in my time in Vegas, and what's so neat is this job was supposed to be like a little part-time side gig, but I always said yes to any opportunity. And that is a scary thing to do, especially nowadays. But
Right.
to be honest, when you're a young artist or even just someone that's young and up and coming, you really should take those opportunities. The internships, unpaid or paid, they're the opportunities that open doors that you would never know of. As I started working at the studio, they started giving me more hours and more hours because I was teaching and selling classes and people wanted to take lessons with
Right.
me. So much so that my boss at the real estate company,
What happened?
she actually fired me. But
You were spending too much time on your other job?
yes.
Uh-huh.
And she gave me a $3,000 ballroom costume with a note that said, go pursue your dreams.
No
You can make
way.
it."
Really?
Oh, yeah. So, like, still tears me up to this day, but the confidence that she gave me to just go for it, I think that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for her.
And she had
Yeah.
nothing to do with the dancing field.
No, she just saw the
Wow.
change in me. And I mean, I think at first it was benefiting the company because my creativity was on fire, but then my passion kind of went a different direction. And very cool of her to see that and acknowledge it and filter it so that, you know, I could go on this journey that was a definite journey after that.
That's beautiful to have somebody believe in you that much that will help propel you into something else, right?
Absolutely.
So when you were a child growing up here in El Paso, did you do a lot of dancing?
Oh gosh.
Because I know that sometimes it's like, you know, when I was a kid, I used to do this, or when I was a kid, I used to do that. And then it just so happens that I turned out to be this ballroom dancer, right?
Right.
This instructor, this choreographer. But how in the world, what was the initial step?
It's a really, really funny question behind that or story behind that, because my dad did not let me pursue dancing whatsoever. My mom wanted to put me in any dance class because dancing kind of ran on her side of the family.
Okay.
But my dad was like, sports, science, sailing, that's what Michelle's going to do. So I learned how to fish. I think he wanted a boy. Now that I look back at it.
Are you a single child?
No, I have a younger brother.
What?
But he didn't do any of those things. So go figure.
So then how did it come about then?
So when my parents used to go out for their date night once a week, I would make my brother hold, you know,
Like a flashlight or something, or a
yes,
lamp?
it was one of those lamps that, you know, have so they kind of look like studio lamp. I don't know
Oh,
where
yeah,
I got
yeah,
this
yeah.
from. And I would get on the coffee table and I would put Michael Jackson or Donna Summers and I would just be dancing. I didn't know what I was doing, but
Wow.
thinking back then, I always wanted to dance. And it was always inside of me. I just didn't pursue it because the opportunity wasn't there for me. So to speak.
Right. And you had also said that some of your family members had made a statement that you're like, I don't remember that.
Yes.
What did you used to make them do?
So apparently I used to get all the grown-ups up at our family gatherings, put them in a line, and then start teaching them a choreography. So,
Wow.
so I was meant to teach dancing.
So you were a dancer and a choreographer at a young age and didn't even know it.
Exactly.
How important is it for you to continue to follow your dreams today, knowing that wasn't even something that you were like headed towards?
Absolutely. I think that I almost wish I had known that was in my childhood, because a lot of times along the way, I think I questioned whether I should be doing this or I should be doing a normal job, which I think the biggest thing that I would want to say to everyone in general is there's no such thing as a normal job.
True.
And I always didn't even see ballroom dancing as something that I could do professionally. And understanding the layers. And I will say, I worked for a company called Arthur Murray, and they train you to be a dancer, a teacher, and like an educator. Not just a teacher, but an educator, instilling hope, helping people progress, more like a life coach, so to speak. And
Interesting.
that balance made me see the actual marketability of ballroom dancing and a longevity in teaching, because you don't have to stop at the age of 20 or 25. You can teach until you're 70 without a problem. So to me, becoming a teacher and someone that can inspire people, we don't say we teach dance, we say we change lives.
Tell us how, because I think that that's what we're doing through this show. we are continuously changing people's lives by showing them people that do things a little bit differently, right? A little bit unorthodoxly. And it's interesting because the people that we have on here can be architects, dancers, DJs, you name it, we have them on here. And the most important aspect is, how do you feel that this way of thinking that you have helps others? So what is it? How do you change lives?
So one of the biggest proponents of ballroom dancing is just the idea that we get to connect with another person, and not through our dialogue of normal, like, interpersonal conversations, but we're actually getting hands-on connection and a lot of nonverbal communication.
What do you mean?
So when we're dancing, for example, if I do this, your
What does one
response
do?
was very clear. And I didn't say, okay, we're about to do something. The response is so simple. And I think we get away from that. And I think COVID really isolated so many of us so much that
there was a huge disconnect, right?
100%.
Right.
100%.
So how do you alleviate that? How do you correct that? How do you help these people?
Starting to educate people on the idea of connection and understanding that it's okay to connect to others, and how one of the biggest things that I think I've seen since COVID especially is people wanting to understand how to connect correctly. What I think is beautiful about what happened through COVID is that we did isolate, and I think there's this also reality where people realize, I don't want to be fake anymore, but also where we've disconnected and kind of shut ourselves down. So learning to turn on that battery again and recharge yourself and understand kind of what that feels like and how to communicate with others is the ultimate thing. I have a gentleman that says he hasn't really talked to people or gone out for about 2 years now.
Wow.
And he tried dancing before. Funny enough, at the studio I worked at in Las Vegas. And
no way.
Yeah, we found out that we missed each other by a few years, right?
Interesting.
I know, it's a small world.
It is a small world.
But he was saying that, I don't think I can learn to dance. I don't think I can do this. I'm just an electrician. I don't really know. I can't do this. I already tried. But he was there at the studio asking me for lessons, and I was like, there's something to this. So we're going to get him going. Getting him just to understand, connecting himself to the music. And I realized there's that disconnect. We're trying to get along with each other, and we're not even in tune with ourselves, so to speak. And that's what dancing allows us to do, because we start to understand it's not just about the other person, it's about who you are and what you stand for. And for our couples, it's so empowering, because both the leader and the follower get to understand the empowerment in their roles and how that works, and it filters throughout. So as much as I haven't even talked about steps or choreography,
right.
But it does so much for people in that sense. That's one of the biggest reasons I love it.
And as you were saying, there is a connection that you try to make to other people. But one of the things that I was thinking as you were saying those words is almost like they're trying to find themselves as well. That connection that they have been missing. Like I always say, I have 2 left feet, right? But does that really mean that I have 2 left feet? Or am I just afraid? Do I need to find a connection within myself? Have you found that that's something that you help people with as well?
100%.
Can you give us an example?
Well, finishing
like
off
that
with
guy?
this gentleman. So he went to a family party just the other week, and he said, so normally I sit in the very back, and I sit facing my enemy, the dance floor. And I started laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is intense.
What kind of experience did he have when he was younger with the dance floor, right?
And then I was like, okay, here we go. But he said, I started looking around and realized none of these people were doing the right steps. He
began to see that.
Yes. And it was the silliest thing, but for him, it was realizing that he's just as normal as everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
But also the fact that he can get up and dance. But now he's like, I can't wait for my dance lessons. This is the favorite part of my day. He's starting to interact with others while he's there. It's beautiful to hear him blossom. And he goes, I never thought I was going to get this from dancing. And to me, that is the best thing, because if someone comes in just to learn steps, that's great. But when you can get your life changed from something like this, that's what I think is beautiful. I really think that dancing is something that should be as important as yoga, as, we talk about our wellness and meditation, but this is a part of it. And actually one of our students that meditates, she's always like, it's just that you guys are always in alpha. You have to be like just flowing in order. And it's kind of true, because you get into the state where your endorphins are releasing and you can just be, and everyone can do it. I swear to you, I have met so many people that tell me they have 2 left feet, and yet they walk in and we can start moving together, and all of a sudden they're like, I can do this. And their whole aura changes from the way their posture is to that stress on their face, and that is worth everything to me as a teacher. So it's just the coolest thing to see.
So speaking about teaching, how important is education for you? And I'm not talking about just like education through ballroom dancing or whatever else you teach as far as dancing is concerned, but I'm talking about how important it is for people to become enlightened, educated through things.
Oh, 100%. I think it's the most valuable thing. For me in my industry, I need to be versed in everything, because we get people from all walks of life. And what I have found is the people that have the most resources normally are very well-rounded, not just in what we consider the typical education. They're genuinely curious about life and try to be knowledgeable in so many different things. And honestly, it's not just about having money. I think there's some people are Google fanatics and can learn so much that I'm like, well, how did you find that? Oh, well, I was on Reddit. I was here. And I think that is so important, because you're in touch with reality, but you're also understanding people and your world around you. And that's how you're going to connect to others. No matter what business or industry you go into, that is going to be something that you're affected with regardless. And being understanding of others, I think, is the biggest tool that we have. And education.
100%.
Education does it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we had talked about before is I'm a firm believer in this whole thing called creativity, right? And I feel like it is one of the most important elements of who we are as human beings. We would still be literally in a cave if we hadn't had the kind of understanding that we need to figure something out to get out of the cave, right? So having said that, one of the things that we talk about in my class specifically are the connections between a work of art called the Mona Lisa, I'm sure you know what that is, and how it connects to all other things. What are some of the elements that you find within dancing that are focused on this whole idea of creativity and art?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Everything from the way we move, to the way we walk, to the way we look, everything is telling some sort of story. And I think any painting, any work of art does that. But from our movement, whether we're painting the story, we're creating the energy, we're setting up, and every movement, it's funny because people ask, well, a lot of people think when we use our ballroom costumes that, you just bought this pretty costume, so you're going to wear that. But there's a reason behind, what we wear.
It tells a story.
It does, and it enhances the whole idea. And I think that is the whole process of it. Everything about ballroom dancing allows you to express and emote, and it's valuable when you're actually putting together a performance, etc., to keep that in mind. Actually, funny enough, we went to a cumbia bar just this past Friday for their grand opening. And they ended up playing a swing song. Oh, really? Yes.
You guys were all about that?
Oh, gosh. It was Jailhouse Rock, and I don't know what.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But we just started playing and feeling, and the whole room got excited, not because, we're showing off. Like, we were genuinely lost in the music.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is like, because you're expressing what this person put together into sound, and now you get to be the visual representation of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that there are different senses, right?
Yeah.
The way that we hear, the way that we speak. And when we put all these things together, then we can create something much, much bigger. And one of the things that we quite often miss is the way that we move.
Yes.
That's one thing that I think a lot of individuals don't understand, that in the way that Pablo Picasso used to create a painting, a choreographer creates their masterpiece. What are some of the elements? Steps, moves, I guess.
Yes,
What else?
we start with, our foot position I call it the order of operations in the body.
What does that mean?
Well,
Tell me about it. That sounds really exciting.
And I say this because I get a lot of engineers that come in and want to learn how to dance, and they say they absolutely could not. And engineers are some of the best dancers. They just don't understand that their body is a tool, just like the tools that they use to construct things. And when we get into the order of operations, for example, the ankle is connected to the knee, which is connected to the hip.
Right.
So everything needs to stand over each other. And there's simple concepts like that. Or if you want to turn a lady, if you move the hand to the right, she's going to turn to the right. If you move it to the left, she turns to the left. I know.
I didn't know that.
But simple concepts like that empower us, because then you know what you're doing and you're like, oh, now I can take off. The training wheels come off and people get to express themselves because they kind of had understanding. I think that's the only part that we get to impart through ballroom, is just giving ourselves clarity in our body, which is why I was saying very much so like yoga or meditation. You're giving yourself the clarity to understand who you are and what you can do. And I think we kind of hold ourselves back sometimes.
I think we do. I think too many people do. And that's what we're here to change,
Yes.
right? We're here to change that attitude and the way that people think. What exactly is ballroom dancing? Everybody's watched, what is it called? Dancing with the Stars?
Yes.
But what is it?
So ballroom dancing is basically, I'll tell you the overall blanket, is any dancing that is with a partner. So besides your pas de deux in ballet, because that's something very different, but basically anything that involves two people dancing together would be considered ballroom dancing. But what we look at as ballroom dancing, there's our international style, which is the most interesting backstory to me, because the Spanish, oh my gosh.
The choreographers or
No,
who?
no. Back a long time ago, when the Spanish were coming, the explorers.
Oh, the explorers,
Thank you. The Spanish explorers went down into Cuba, into the islands, and they studied the people that were dancing there and the culture, etc. And so they brought home their interpretation of what they saw there. So you have this
So they came here, took this, and brought it back to Spain.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And while they were there, they said, let's send this to France to get it interpreted by, the best dancers, which were ballerinas at the time. So when we look at ballroom dancing, we see a lot of structure, a lot of long lines, a lot of precise high poise. And that comes from the ballerinas interpreting this dance that should be actually completely opposite. So what's really neat, though, is that these two styles are now considered two styles of ballroom. So there's your international, which is much more aligned and focused, and then there's what we call your American style, which is more gritty, but very much more round, so to speak. It has more depth to it, so to speak. So it's interesting that history did that to us, but at the same time, it's why people are fascinated by ballroom, because there is so much to see and so much to interpret by it.
Are you excited for the fact that people can now watch Dancing with the Stars and have a much kind of closer connection to you?
Oh, 100%. I actually got to work with a lot of the dancers from Dancing with the Stars, and that was a really big proponent for me. Actually, they're the ones that moved me to Los Angeles from Las Vegas. But what I loved was the access. We had a grand opening where they were all there, and I was the manager of the studio at the time. So for me, I was like, oh, this is going to be crazy. But the people that came were from all walks of life, and they wouldn't have been there had it not been for this TV show that propelled all of this. So to see that all these people are now engaged and actually feeling like they can do it too, it's the most empowering thing for our industry. And honestly, it's brought it a long way, and it's changed our industry a lot, because our costumes have changed. What we think is acceptable has changed. What we think is acceptable with hairdos. I mean, something so simple. You would never see anyone with something that would be, I mean, this was excessive to have a ponytail.
Interesting.
Now you see, you know, half hairdos with glowing hair, and very different look than what we used to consider before Dancing with the Stars. They have changed our industry and enhanced it so much.
It's a beautiful thing to see, because a lot of individuals don't understand what ballroom dancing is, as myself, right? And then we start to see something, and I think that it brings joy to us. You know, when I see somebody being creative, when I see somebody really outdoing themselves, it gives me energy. And that's one of the things that I don't think that a lot of people understand, what the value behind it is. For you, what is the value in dancing?
Oh gosh. The value is being able to express myself with the right clarity and intention, which I learned through understanding my movement and understanding my movement in relation to another person. And that's very deep when we're talking about dance, but truly that's what ballroom has given me. But also the value of it is being able to really tap into yourself through understanding who you are and what you do subconsciously and consciously. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that it brings to everyone.
So it really does turn out that it's like a therapy, right?
Oh, in my opinion, I 100% agree with that. Big time. I think that we are therapists that move.
And I love that. What kind of advice can you give our audience that's watching us right now? And what kinds of things can you relay to them from the perspective of a dancer?
Absolutely. Number one, if you feel the itch to do something creatively, do it, and don't feel bad to mess up, because as a creative, you're gonna go through the messy stage, and the messy stage is where you actually find yourself. At least that's my view. So start it, try it, jump into it. Don't shy away from it. If I had listened to people telling me that I could not be a dancer for so many different reasons, I would not be who I am today. And I don't think I would be happy in what I do. And I love what I get to do. So the other thing is, don't be afraid to take your creative outlet and figure out a way to truly monetize it, because I think that that's where we all are creative in some way, and we don't want to give it the value that it deserves. And I think that especially in today's world, you can monetize so many of your creative outlets
100%.
Into something serious. Yeah.
Beautifully said. So Michelle, I wanted to thank you for taking the opportunity to come out here and talk to us, because our viewers are always excited to see new people and what they do. So I wanted to thank you. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I definitely did. Thank you so much for having me again.
Awesome. So everybody, I wanted to thank you guys for joining us once again. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and you guys are watching Creative Thinkers. And if you guys want to contact me, you guys can contact me at mvalen31@epcc.edu. And please send me some contacts so we can talk to some more people. Thank you very much for joining us.